you know the thing man akoba to like the jumedi do jumedi ya to ba chiche na ya to ne no call jumedi yenyim na da pana basani za wa kodo wo omanga ne mu a wa ye ho a dubu wa kasa titi wona wo opposition no o dem kuma wana ano wa kasa tia ne no ye bira his excellency John Dramani Mahama was suspend the chief justice oye chief justice Gertrude Esaba Saki Torkornoo onam petition a manfo ebasa ekuo basa wa ye etia with the minti one ma oye the council of states there where you can add yaba kanye there why establish the Kamafasi against him the minti onamdo but his excellency the president John Dramani Mahama was served the chief justice a suspension letter na na oye the NPP of the minority ono bonjodo wakasa akasa monam the minti was solicit the support of the other political parties in na was obey demonstration etia na ono na wana warrior assemtia oye the chief justice ni ono muko oye professor kuku asare do the friend professor Azar odin chechem ga ba sensi why your petition against the chief justice amonam do ma ende nani jumedi no call jumedi do no ya to the yes professor Azar discusses why he nailed chief justice Torkornoo with petition for her removal. Professor Azar discusses why he nailed chief justice Torkornoo with petition for her removal. Now ono ana yapada yema yana kafo akonya me yakokote nchechema oya professor Azar onara oza abachuga senso anamdenti emma why a petition against the chief justice there one permanent fee or send there she is not qualified none of them to be means yebia oye ni subi odedezi wa mejumemu as chief justice in we bu embalo de the minti o said we yini fi ho wanamdo emma his excellency the president John Dramani Mahama the prayer we can say the chief justice she is on suspension yanko me can say professor Kuku Asare what our friend Professor Azar
you know when I filed the petition many media people tried to call me to come on air and I refused because I respected the privacy of the proceedings as articulated in by Dateba in the Ajay case. So this is the first time that I'm actually coming on TV to say something about this petition, which I thought was poorly handled. Now, you talk about my petition did not have evidence and so on. This is false. I not only had facts, but I provided dates, events, and I also indicated witnesses that I was going to bring along during the inquiry phase to substantiate the allegations that I was making. Because when you submit a petition to a president, you are not attaching evidence because the president is not a trier of fact. You are submitting enough to let the president decide whether or not there's enough in there to push to a body that can inquire into it. Okay, so when I come in there and I say, look, the Chief Justice, and before I even say that, let me acknowledge that, look, the removal of a Chief Justice is a grave matter. I certainly will never be part of any attempt to remove a Chief Justice unless I was absolutely convinced that there was a good reason to do that. Second, people often talk about judicial independence, and I agree with everything that they say about judicial independence, except when they talk about judicial independence, they are always talking about institutional independence, for the executive trying to intrude into the affairs of the judiciary. That is one facet of independence. But there's also decisional independence. And in decisional independence, the Chief Justice or can interfere with the proper or independent functioning of a judge or a judicial body. That is decisional independence. And that was the basis of my petition. The Chief Justice had unconstitutionally inserted herself into the naming of Supreme Court justices. There's a very good reason that when you read the Constitution, it doesn't include the Chief Justice in this process, because the Supreme Court is supposed to be a court of equals. Every member of the court is an equal. The Chief Justice is the chief, largely because she also performs administrative functions. But when it comes to their judging, deciding cases, each panel member has one vote. Each panel member is an equal. And you can see the mayhem and the bedlam if indeed judges started coming to believe that they have to play ball with the Chief Justice, because the Chief Justice has a role in whether or not Supreme Court. Unconstitutional and the gravest breach of our Constitution for the Chief Justice to name specific justices and write to the President, unknown to us until the letter was leaked, that I want A, B, C, D, E to be appointed to the Supreme Court. Why A, B, C, D, E? And look at the embarrassment that you bring to some of the judges who you've named, because some of the judges were actually sensitive cases at the time. And to name them gives the appearance that the executive and the judiciary are in cahoot to promote people who are sitting on political sensitive cases. So that was a serious breach. It was the only reason I filed the petition. It gives me no joy whatsoever. In fact, submit a petition for the removal of a Chief Justice. But where the Chief Justice gives me no option by involving himself or herself in the naming of Supreme Court justices, that's just one leg of my petition. The second leg was in the reconstitution of panels that have already started hearing cases. If you read the Constitution tells us that once a panel starts to hear a case, that panel cannot be changed. In fact, Chief Justice has no administrative authority over that panel. He couldn't tell them, sit today, or I'm moving one person out of the panel, because if she did that, and if we allowed a Chief Justice to do that, the Chief Justice will be interfering with the decisional issues of court panels. I mentioned specific cases in which this had happened. I indicated in my petition that I'll bring Justice Jamafe to testify about these things. And then third, I raised the question of how decrees were being used to regulate the courts, contrary to the Constitution. The Constitution says, look, if you are going to issue any directives about how courts should operate, do that with a constitutional instrument, and it specifies an elaborate process. The reason for that elaborate process is because we don't have an imperial Chief Justice who can just do whatever she wants. The Chief Justice is subject to the Constitution, and if you want to if you want to come out with a rule, there's a rule-making process. You have to meet with the Judicial Council. You have to have a constitutional instrument. It has to be laid in Parliament. It has to take a certain number of days to ripe. And then once it ripens, it becomes the law. But the Chief Justice was on her own doing these things. And this is the reason why I got involved. And I thought that if that or those things that she was doing were not addressed in a very fundamental way, we stand the risk of allowing future Chief Justices because of the precedent that had been set by her. There's a reason why from Redu through Aqua to Georgina Wood to Sophia Kufu to Ani Yabua, none of them ever attempted to name somebody to the Supreme Court because they knew that was fatally and incurably flawed and wrong and unconstitutional and constitutes a violation of their oath of office.
Former president, and I just need to make the clarification that you referenced the president. I think this the former president, Nana Akufo-Addo, is the one you petitioned. In all this clearly elucidated positions that you have just espoused, he concludes that your petition was deemed frivolous, vexatious, and unmeritorious. That was his conclusion to your petition.
That is laughable because
is it laughable?
Ask yourself, yeah, of course it's laughable. Ask yourself, after that petition, do we know whether it is wrong, or by that petition are we saying that future Chief Justices can reconstitute panels? Are we saying that future Chief Justices can send names to a president on who to appoint? Why this particular justices, not others? I mean, on the Court of Appeal, we have very experienced and very astute justices. Sir Dennis, for instance, comes to mind. Why would a Chief Justice overlook Sir Dennis and go and suggest some other person who is Sir Dennis's junior, not just in terms of tenure, but in terms of accomplishments? If the Chief Justice is allowed to do that, can't people understand and appreciate the toxic culture that would have been introduced into the judiciary, where every member of the court will now be trying to please the Chief Justice, something that the constitutional framers were keenly aware of and did all they can to say, no, we are not that kind of institution where the Chief Justice decides be promoted. Rather, let's leave that to the political branches to decide who should get nominated to the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeal and so on. It is a violation of the Constitution. It doesn't happen anywhere. It is not a light matter. You see, one of the things that I think we get fixated about is if something does not involve money, then people cannot see that there's a big issue. They say, oh, well, but there is no breach of the Constitution as serious as a Chief Justice becoming the person who combs the court and decides who should be appointed to the Supreme Court or who should be promoted. Once you allow that, you compromise incurably the independence of the judiciary, because now all the judges are trying to please the Chief Justice, because you know that if you get into her bad books, if you are not in her, she's never going to recommend you for promotion. And that is something that we want to avoid. Are we saying that, or is that President Akufo-Addo saying that he doesn't think a committee should inquire into why court panels parties in the, and often in a way that gives the hint of political, a political flavor? He doesn't think that. This to me was so fundamental that anybody who understands what determination is will laugh when the Council of State, my uncle, I love Uncle Sam. I mean, I go to see him whenever I'm in Ghana and so on. He's very good to me. But he, before the calling the petitions. That's why in that determination, they are not independent. That was just some prefabricated determination, because any neutral panel would look at it and say, well, look, these allegations are serious. We don't know whether they warrant a removal or not. A committee should look into it, because the matters that have been raised are very fundamental to the health of the judiciary. And if we don't resolve them, we will create a precedent where future chief justices come in and then they start naming people to the Supreme Court. They start reconstituting panels. They start transferring people and so on. So I thought there should have been more outcry at the president's determination of no prima facie case.
In your petition?
And in my petition, yes. And in the current petition, where there is a prima facie determination, I mean, that makes sense, because the prima facie determination is such a low threshold that unless somebody is motivated by malice, they would make a good case. I mean, in my case, I mean, I had no malice. I don't have anything against the Chief Justice. In fact, I like the Chief Justice. I like the Chief Justice. And it pained me when she was doing some of those things. So as far back as maybe January 2024 or maybe later in 2023, I started making public announcements that these panel reconstitutions must stop. Justice Jamafe shown the red card. It's not good. Opuni judge transferred. It's not good. Imperial Chief Justice stop. I made repeated efforts to get to her to stop some of the things that she was doing. It was only when I concluded that she was not going to stop and that I had a civic duty to intervene. That's when I filed the petition. No petitioner is happy to file a petition. And I don't know about the president, but if I were to assume, no president enjoys being conscripted to determine a prima facie case, because they are sitting somewhere minding their own business, trying to push their agenda. But when the petition comes, they have no option. The Constitution mandates that they look at the petition, send it to the Council of State and determine a prima facie case. And like I said, the standard for prima facie case is not adjudication. It's not the duty of the president to say, well, the Chief Justice did this because Rule 4 allows the Chief Justice to do that. How do you know as a president? Are you a judge? Are you don't know any of these things. You are simply to determine a prima facie case, and anything that you say that is adjudicatory in nature, which the president's prima facie determination, not the current president, but the president, remarks, biased remarks, that response that the president gave to my petition is one that lecturers should use to teach their students how not to determine a prima facie case under Article 146.
You reference Justice Senyor Jamafe a number of times. Just to establish it, is it a meeting you had, or as whether you've met him before, or as just a reference to a particular position that he took in previous instances?
No, it was not it's not reference to a position that he took or whether I've met him, but he was one of the victims of this panel reconstitution.
Okay.
And so I was going to subpoena him and then put him on the oath to try to explain to us what happened.
Right.
I was actually going to subpoena the former president to try and establish whether there was collusion between him and the Chief Justice to name these people to the court. And then there was some plot whereby the Chief Justice was supposed to originate the names, and then the president would probably say, well, I don't it's not mine decision, the judiciary wanted.
Okay.
I was going to do all that. That is why the inquiry was important.
The question is whether you are going to consider resubmitting your petition to President John Dramani Mahama, which was...
Well, again, following my stand on Article 146, I'm not going to disclose whether I will submit it, whether I've submitted it, whether I'm thinking about submitting it, and that will remain private.
Very well. Well, that's respected, But then again, because and let's put it on record that yes, indeed, this is the first time you are speaking about your petition on any media platform, and we appreciate that. But then again, you hear the former president in that response to your petition, essentially taking the position that the Chief Justice's conduct that you cited and haven't explained quite clearly why you depart in thought and in position from Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo and the then Council of State position on your petition. He says that the Chief Justice's administrative responsibilities really under the Court Act were found to be consistent with the law and established practices based on what she had done. So why then again do you raise questions about it?
Because that's exactly my point. The president is now a judge. He says, oh, okay, based on your petition, and I found out later on that the Chief Justice had responded. I never saw the Chief Justice's response, so I was not able to rebut her, her response. But the president is now a judge. He's saying, well, I think that the Court Act, I don't think that the Court Act supersedes the Constitution. When it says X should happen, I don't care what some Court Act is saying. And frankly, the Court Act that he quoted, he misquoted that. The Court Act doesn't say that. So everything that the president said, I disagree with completely. But that's not the point. The point is the president should not put himself in a position where he's now a judge, saying, well, I don't believe what the petitioner is saying. I believe what the Chief Justice is saying. Here is what the law is. That is the function of the committee that is supposed to inquire into the allegations. Only the committee is supposed to inquire into the allegations, especially in my petition, where I allege that the Chief Justice improperly sent names to the president. So the president should have been sensitive and say, well, look, I'm even involved in this thing, and I want a committee to come out and establish that there was no wrongdoing. You
for so you say the reasons, the basis upon which Professor Kweku Asare petitioned the president or petitioned the removal of the Chief Justice Gertrude Araba Isabasa Torkornoo. The learned professor has explicitly espoused on his basis upon which he petitioned the then former president, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Take note, the former president, who is a lawyer, who ought to know better, ended up rubbishing the petition. And here you have heard the petitioner, Professor Kweku Asare, popularly called Professor Azar, has explained the basis and why he has strongly disagreed with the former president, His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, for failing to act on his earlier petition at the time he was in office. His Excellency the President rubbish Professor Kweku Asare's petition that he filed against the Chief Justice the petition that was calling for the removal of now the suspended Chief Justice Gertrude Araba Isaba Saki Torkornoo. One will be asking His Excellency, the former President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, was it a deliberate to shield the woman or what? Or is it that Wabo Sebi, as we always say in our parlance, there the basis upon which the petitioner filed a petition against the Chief Justice na Anyibiara, was it the case there? Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Or can in a one task another way who say yes, say the former president Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo or your lawyer or your Benini Nanka, the call we really expect today. He ought to know better. In Tensema na Professor Azar Rike, General Jina Dinti, not sure Kata the Koma or Mampenyin Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, bra no wa bedemu. There, you know, Otimwa for opinion, you know, my Gertrude Araba Isaba Saki Torkornoo. Which said the economy of the Juma as Chief Justice in an on new or manam brandon and the Constitution in an on you be bra. Never been see position now or hold it Ziblona up and Chief Justice on Fata. She was not competent enough because she has demonstrated gross incompetency as far as the discharge of her office is concerned. Now, you'll be saying that you will not a Mampenyin Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. Now, our patcher there, the Minjina Prof to me on no way, another it was a case there. Oh, Yankata Maminichi because me your Mampenyin power lies in my bosom. I can do whatever I want to do with it. On internet, we petition as a benedict, Bongalat, Yambonchu, that's been no baby. Was that the case under His Excellency, the former President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, the self-acclaimed competent Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo? Thus is what the bitter truth. And then, young Zawesi, some people have filed several petitions against the Chief Justices Gertrude Araba Isaba Saki Torkornoo. And she is on suspension. Remember the show you are watching is the Bitter Truth Show. Today we brought to you the basis upon which Professor Azar petition against the removal of the Chief Justice Gertrude Araba Isaba Saki Torkornoo. And we decided to caption today's presentation as Professor Azar discusses why he nailed Chief Justice Torkornoo with petition for her removal. Remember, the show is the bitter truth. It's a truth is bitter. When it is told, it heals. It's like a bitter pill. It must be swallowed. This is the bitter truth. If today is the first time you are watching this show on either Ghana News Facebook channel or Ghana News YouTube, we are humbly pleading with you to like the page, subscribe to the Ghana News YouTube channel, click on the notification bell so that next time we are on show or we upload contents, you may be notified to be part of it. Above all, drop your views and opinions in the comment section. You are the reason we bring this show to you. Let us get interactive. Let us hear from you. Drop your views. What is your view about the removal of the Chief Justice Gertrude Araba Isaba Saki Torkornoo. We want to hear from you. Let us hear from you. Remember, the former president, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, on his swearing in, made a clarion call to the people of Ghana to be citizens and not spectators. So, let us be citizens, not spectators. The show is The Bitter Truth. Thank you for using your credits, your data to watch this show. Spending your time with this presentation. Subscribe to the Ghana Band News YouTube channel. Drop your comment, click on the notification bell, like the Facebook page. Feel free to share to reach others. And most importantly, drop your comment in the comment section because it is very important for us. You are the reason the bitter truth comes your way. Thank you. May God watch over you and keep you out of trouble. So we come your way with another unadulterated, authentic bitter truth show. We say goodbye.